I'm Jeff Babbitt. I'm co-editor of Seneca Review and of our journal's brand new press, Seneca Review Books, whose premiere release we mark tonight with the publication of Erica Trabold's debut collection, Five Plots. I would like to start by thanking my co-editor, David Weiss, who figures most importantly, indispensably behind tonight's reading, but is celebrating the occasion in absentia in Florida, actually. I would also like to thank the Trias Residency for Writers, the Writing and Rhetoric and English departments, Dwayne Lucas and the Office of Academic and Financial Affairs, the students and alums who served on our acquisitions editorial board, especially those of you who traveled back to campus just for Erica's reading, all of you for coming out this evening, and finally, several of Erica's family members who traveled great distances to make it here tonight. Thank you all for coming. And now to our reader. Erica Trabold is a Nebraska-born essayist who has won the 2017 Drake University Peyton James Freeman Award, the 2016 Oregon State University Joyce Carol Oates Award, and of course, Seneca Review Books' inaugural Deborah Lyric Essay Book Prize, selected by John Dakota. Her lyric essays appear in the Rumpus, Passages North, the Collagist, South Dakota Review, Seneca Review, Essay Daily, and elsewhere. She is a graduate of Oregon State University's MFA program and the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Erica writes and teaches in Portland, Oregon. In order to explain my elation about tonight's reading, I need to provide just a little bit of context. The inception of our book prize goes back to October 2015. It was born at a Trias reception during Mary Ruefle's reign as Trias resident. I was speaking with a student and asked them if they would be interested in taking a publishing course based off of an active book prize. The student was enthusiastic and said yes, although they didn't end up taking the class when it was offered 2 years later. A bit of a brown noser, it turned out. Anyway, so I walked over to David Weiss to see what he thought, and we've been working on it ever since. I tell you this admittedly dull story to underscore one main point. It took almost exactly 3 years to go from the idea to its realization. And for over 2 years, we worked on the book prize without knowing the book that we would publish, the author toward whom our efforts were going. And what I can't possibly stress enough is how profoundly fortunate we are that those 2 years of work ended up being for Erica and her brilliant book, Five Plots. Indeed, as John Dakota himself put it, it's the perfect inaugural winner of this new book prize. In her famous opening to the White Album, Joan Didion writes, "We tell ourselves stories in order to live." Trabold reminds us of that simple truth while emphasizing the extraordinary precariousness of such reliance. In fact, early in her first essay, Trabold writes something similar. "I cling to what I have been told." Not only is this true for her narrator, but for other characters in the book as well, because it is true for all of us. How we make meaning and our very understandings of who we are, of our memories, and of our own families are based upon narratives, things others have told us, things we tell ourselves, to which we cling. Five Plots is a book full of healthy skepticism toward the stories we tell ourselves, eschewing easy ways of understanding and experiencing the world. In all 5 of these essays, weighty and existential matters, often of life and death, linger just beneath the surface of the quotidian or seemingly innocuous. Here is a book that is fully aware, to borrow Didion's phrase, of the shifting phantasmagoria behind the narrative lines we impose. And yet, despite such realizations, it is also a book of affirmation, as when later in the same essay, Trabold writes, "I'm beginning to like it that way, being lost in the mystery of where it all ends." But despite the rich philosophical opportunities Five Plots gives its readers, we also can't overlook the fact that it is quite simply a beautiful, beautiful book, full of deftly crafted sentences that are as notable for their precision as they are for their lyricism, rhythmic integrity, and variety of cadences. She's a writer who seems to always find the exact language a given moment needs. And on a more global level, Five Plots has a perfectly satisfying trajectory, which is why you have to get a copy and read the whole thing yourself. This book's intelligence runs deep in its exploration of place, landscape, identity over time, the dangers of nostalgia, and those elements' impacts on our lives and our relationships with family and friends. It delves into the very notion of how we are shaped by the land every bit as much as we shape it, which makes for a fascinating investigation of place as a malleable, psychological, and phenomenological force. Or as Trabold puts it at one point, we feel the pull of place deeply. Indeed, it's a pull the reader will feel while immersed in her pages. It's a pull I find myself wanting to keep going back to. It's an unspeakable honor to introduce you to the inimitable Erica Trabold.
Hi, I just realized we wore matching outfits. We totally planned that. I want to say thank you to every single person who's here. This is a hugely significant moment in my life. This is my first book, and thank you for sharing it with me. And thank you especially to those of you that were in the class that advocated for my book and read it in its early days, its early life on this earth, and for Jeff for everything, for your hospitality. I've imagined this place for a long time. Probably not since 1997, but it has a rich history that started then, right? The lyric essay, and all that happened here with Seneca Review deciding to name it and say, in short, we want to publish this, send us your lyric essays. I think, well, I don't know what I was doing in 1997. Is that the year we went to Disney World? So at least 1 week of 1997, that's where I was. I wasn't reading Seneca Review, but important work was happening here that would be very meaningful to my life. When I started writing in college really seriously, my professors and mentors said, this thing you're doing, it has a name. You should read Seneca Review. You should read Deborah. You should read John Dakota. And they became my heroes. So this is awesome. I wish I could say it better. I'm going to read 2 essays for you tonight from the book. A List of Concerns is the first one. It's written in the form of a list. But I think that the rhythm of it is really interesting, so I don't tend to read the numbers. What I'd encourage you to do is, when you buy your copy, to read it later and have a totally different experience reading the numbers in this list and seeing where they're at. So thank you again. Here it goes. A List of Concerns. The size of a paper cut compared to its sting. A bandage run under the tap, the soggy reminder. Glue left behind on wrinkled skin, the ways I was told to behave. Don't pick the flowers, don't walk in the grass. Wear black to a funeral. In lieu of flowers, send money. The apologies I can't remember if I've made. When we were kids, my friends and I had a habit of making long lists. Lists of things we wanted for our birthdays and for Christmas, gifts we thought our parents should buy, lists of cities we found beautiful, the places we wanted to go, the beaches we wanted to see, lists of qualities, of appearance and of character we wanted in our husbands, lists of qualities we wanted to preserve in ourselves. We considered the girls we were, the ways we wanted to stay, and the women we wanted to become. Our lists were demanding, the requirements exhaustive. That our framework was inflexible, that we didn't allow for change. Allie, Carrie, and I sat at our kitchen tables with our notebooks, markers spilling out of our mother's old Tupperware containers. All of us marked on the table by accident. All of us made a mess. All of us wrote our futures and continued playing the game as if it could keep us in the room forever, as if we could know what forever would be like. We marked up dozens of ruled pages a new color announcing the arrival of a new idea, numbers and line breaks separating that idea from those previous. At the end of each line, I left my mark, a single exclamation point, and formed its stem into the shape of a triangle. Simple punctuation could not communicate my conviction, my certainty. I shaded my exclamations thick. Sometimes I drew 2 or 3 for effect, louder shouts into the void. The logic of permanent marker. The logic of the list, a form concerned with the failure of memory, a recipe broken down into its parts for the practical purpose of navigating the store, of getting home with exactly what you need and not having to return. The struggle to remember what I wrote in those lists, where I've kept them, or if, that I've lost the paper, that I remember the game, that I remember how it felt to be friends. When we were kids, I probably didn't write, "Someday I hope to be driving a minivan down a rural highway in Nebraska just to see where it ends." And I probably didn't prioritize my desire to wander the fields 35 miles from the rural hospital where I was born. I didn't know that in those fields a few acres of native prairie grasses remained. This is the situation in which I find myself, the borrowed van, the grass, the highway ending as it does, driving in the direction of the prairie reserve, a place I've never been. I come to a sign that signals a dead end. I'm forced to make a U-turn at the end of the gravel road. I'm not sure how it happened, but I ventured beyond what I came to see. The end of the road, the limitless sky. I still haven't found our prairie. The illusion that, along with our families, we lived on the prairie. In school, we studied pictures and drawings, watched movies, and read first-hand accounts. Books about little houses made their way from backpack to backpack and girl to girl. The land, we believed, had never really changed. What we didn't understand was that the prairie couldn't have been further from our experience by the time we were born, a mere memory. Instead of blue stem, needlegrass, or drop seed, we grew up in a little town surrounded by cornfields, bean fields, and once every few summers, fields of golden sunflowers. The prairie had once been, but not in Nebraska anymore. The fact that adventure used to be my favorite word. The fact that it means something different to me now. The fact that the first time I saw a goldenrod flower, my grandfather was pointing to the plant. He stopped driving and rolled down the window on the passenger side of the pickup. "This is our state flower," he said. "Now that you know what it looks like, I don't want you to ever pick it." The childish temptation to break every rule. Goldenrod blooming in every ditch, every meadow. The selfish act of claiming anything as your own. When we were kids, I remember picking a handful of goldenrod and other prairie flowers to fill out the bouquet. I walked home, watching pieces of flower fall to the ground. I plucked every pod and petal, tossing them into the wind. I threw the still green stems into the grass. No one would ever catch me holding them. When we were kids, I probably wrote myself an escape. In our hometown, older folks remembered when things were quieter, more wild. The past hung around us like a fog. Though invisible on drier days, it was never really gone. Water always raining down, or cycling the air, or seeping through cracks in the pavement. I felt I had been cutting through it, waving my arms for the exit for too long. That we maintained our lists well into high school, that our rootlessness began to show, that our senior class picture was taken in a field of blooming sunflowers. None of us had ever seen them like that, planted in rows, and yet we chose that field to mark our experience together and to symbolize its end. We asked the farmer for permission. That the settlers said to themselves, "Nothing could grow here but grass." They encountered the grass in every way, ankle high, knee high, chin high, and as it often seemed, grass all the way to the sky. The flowers were just as tall. Opposite their gaze, the root system beneath the prairie was an even deeper thing, complex and vast. But most of them could only see the land as absence, lacking something to be desired. The logic of the return. To the prairie, We are always returning, as if from exile. And likewise, we are charged with returning the prairie to itself, attempting to regrow what we know should have been there in the first place. Now that I'm standing inside one, I see for the first time the prairie's real and total color. I knew the shades of green and yellow would vary, each blade of grass a slight contradiction to the next, but I didn't realize there would be so many flowers, that there would be so many shapes. Goldenrod, sunflower, coneflower, vervain, or that prairie flowers, taller than I could have imagined, would thrill me most. Prairie sunflowers once coexisted with our native grasses, though smaller than those farmed for seed, wild and unruly. During the years when it rains enough to flood every roadside and riverbank, wildflowers spring up from the earth by the handful. But I only see them along the sides of the highways and county roads anymore, little flowers in the ditch. When we were kids, we planned our weddings. Allie planned most. She picked out the colors and the dresses, the groom, and the flowers. She wrote a list describing the man she would marry. He would own a farm. He would like to read. He wouldn't believe in divorce. When Allie married for the first time, we were 19. The three of us spent a whole night making bouquets. Carrie taught us how. At the wedding, we each carried 3 flowers, real flowers, bright orange daisies I thought looked fake. I whispered to Carrie, when I get married, I'm going to pay for everything. I'm going to hire a florist, and I'm going to pay for all the dresses. No one told me the flowers growing on the side of the road were survivors, the native species with the will to cling on, despite all efforts to eradicate them from the landscape. That Allie married a second time. She posed for pictures on the Old Town Square and danced in slow circles, palms lightly touching her husband's waist in our high school gymnasium. That I didn't go to her wedding, politely declined the invitation, the cost of a plane ticket too high. That I didn't give her the real reason. When I got married, Carrie asked Allie, do you remember what she said? I hired a florist, but the flowers were incinerated at customs, infected by an invasive species that would harm our natural environment. The florist called shops all over the country, but nobody had the flowers I wanted. I didn't pay for the dresses. I didn't realize what a wedding would cost. But I couldn't take back the words, the certainty they held at 19, at 22, at 8 or 9. I carried bright tulips instead. It's like that. When I see them now, my friends have a habit of reminding me who I used to be. The last time, we were sitting on old stools at the American Legion Club, the only bar left in town. Allie had a few dollar bills in her pocket. She played a few songs on the jukebox, songs we used to love when we were kids. We sang along. After a few hard lemonades, we started to remember what it was like to be young together. Allie remembered most. She echoed back jokes, remarks I once made at Carrie's expense. She remembered my rationale. But Carrie wasn't there to verify the impact of my words or their ruthlessness. I remember bullying Carrie on more than one occasion, probably because someone had already made her a target. We made fun of her glasses and her hair, her grammar and her clothes. I'm sure what Allie said about me is true. That I said this, that I said that I said a lot of awful things. I don't find it difficult to believe in my own cruelty. That restoring the prairie requires commitment, a return from exile. I said to Allie, I'm sorry, I used to be such a jerk, and filled a bowl with popcorn from the machine at the other end of the bar. Until I had a landscape to compare it to, I never saw so clearly the green of my home, how the cottonwoods hug the river, how big the sun sets over crop and pivot and pasture. Today the wind is bright, pushing puffs of cloud fast over swaying grass and flowers. Though the path through the prairie is mown ankle high, I don't know where exactly it will lead. I plan to walk until I feel sufficiently drowned, until I am insignificant, small, The logic of the return. My friends say home is where they'll go. The time I accused Carrie of stealing my favorite pen, which I later discovered I had carelessly misplaced. Carrie was writing with a pen that looked like mine. She had even broken its stem in the same place I had broken my own, a detail I now recognize as coincidence, or fault of manufacturing. After school, Carrie's mom called mine to tell her how mean I'd been. Carrie, she said, was in her room, crying. The next day, I told Carrie to stop letting her mom fight her battles. I don't know if I ever apologized. After the third drink, I said, the thing I hate most about this town is that nobody taught us how to be good friends to each other. You know what I mean? I walked through the prairie in silence. The occasional car passing too slowly and creating a cloud of dust makes me uneasy. I don't know if I should be alone, if someone will spot the van I parked on the side of the road, or if it's obvious I'm without company and vulnerable. When I see light pickup approaching, I duck behind the grass. Only then do I realize why I've come, how badly I don't want to be seen. That I'm tired of talking about the prairie, about things I wish I'd known. When a pheasant flies out from the cover of grass, I'm startled. She looks brown and dull, and though she lacks the colorful markings of a male, the sound of her flight is loud, violent, and sudden. With nothing other than my presence, I seem to have first startled the bird. She took off in a hurry, beating her face and wings into the grass as she cut an angled line through the native grove, out and up into the clouds. That a year ago today, not far from our hometown, Carrie found her mother dead in the bathroom. She had moved out into the country. Carrie called an ambulance and waited as the paramedics raced over the gravel roads. That my mom called me from work to tell me about the death of Carrie's mother. To describe the panic the town briefly entertained before gossip overcame it. Was there a note? Were there signs? Had someone helped her do it? That I wanted to call Carrie, say something reassuring or sincere, and yet I didn't want her to have to hear my voice. That Carrie had the kind of mother who defended her daughter's feelings, and I had the kind who never told me to stop and consider how my words might cause another person pain. The card on which I wrote, "I'm sorry," below the printed greeting. I stuffed a check inside the envelope. That money now seems a hollow gesture. That the grass is taller and sharper than it looks from a distance, and the prairie is not a place I've ever known. If I had, I would have remembered. I would have taken precautions. The predictable way the blades slice at my skin and leave behind a stinging rash. That I might have come differently, with reverence, but just as I am in shorts and old tennis shoes, blood runs brightly down my shins. The logic of the return. The logic that all I want is to pick one. A small, wild sunflower. A compromise for the bouquet I have better sense than to assemble. The flower I've chosen is rooted deep. Its stem strong enough to make me struggle for several minutes to free. When it finally gives, I lay the flower inside the van and drive back toward the highway. This road will take me to the country cemetery. I will place a single flower on the headstone. How quickly a wildflower wilts when severed from its root. I've read that Native Americans used to make soothing treatments from the stems and leaves of prairie flowers. They used the mixture to heal snake bites and ease the itch of ivy rashes. They used what they could find on the prairie, beauty in abundance, to relieve the most basic signs of pain. Thank you so much. One thing I love about the place that you all live right now is all of the goldenrod flowers everywhere. It's the first thing I noticed. I have one more short one for you that I have time to read. Okay. This is the title essay of the collection. It's very special to me. because it was one of the first lyric essays I ever published. I published it in Seneca Review. 5 plots. 1. I am going to have to start at the other end by telling you this. I am close to my death. My grave has been plotted and paid for by my father. He told me about the purchase at some family gathering. Perhaps it was Christmas or Thanksgiving or the Saturday we finally decided to put down the family cat. I bought 4 of them. We don't have to use them, but we have them. As if death is a choice. And we made that choice for the cat. The frailty of her limbs and muscles after successive strokes, the yellow-white curdling of skin and hair, odor that clung to the bed in which she slept dirty for weeks, triggered a sympathetic response. We gave consent, paid for her veins to be injected with poison. 19 years after we gave her a home, a beautiful box in which to live, she came back to us in one much smaller, sealed with packing tape. We buried the box 4 feet deep in the backyard, next to the peony bushes that blossom in pinks late in the spring. Mom's initial suggestion, wouldn't that be nice? The agony of perpetual wandering frightens us. Our cat was blind, confused, lost in her own home, but I'm not sure I want to go down that deep, not in this small town cemetery. Would anyone remember me? Or had I drifted too far? My family could bury me here, in the backyard, at home, tucked in tight beneath the dirt and gravel that used to wedge itself inside my skinned elbows, next to the cat they gave me for Christmas when I was 3. The swing set is gone, but the flowers still bloom. Really? Wouldn't that be nice? 2. Early on in life, we acquire slight curves. They accumulate quickly at first. A certain crick in the neck, then something more severe and uncomfortable, a broken bone, scoliosis, a sudden blow to the body on an otherwise ordinary day, a dead cat stuffed into a cardboard box. Was the spine designed to be a cracked thing, always bent, twisting closer to the ground? The first subluxation often occurs at birth. I've heard you can wander through life without realizing you're misaligned, but at some point you might begin to feel the symptoms. And so you make adjustments. You pay for your fixes. You go to the clinic 3 times a week. You try yoga. You are a dog, a cat, a cow stretching, breathing deeply, looking for a moment toward the sun or mountains. You feel a strange impulse in child's pose, to turn over your palms, lift and expose them to the air. An offering. That's how I think it works. Some offering of pain and life lived, but what do you expect to receive in those open, dirty hands? That, I don't know. 3. What are you doing? Digging a grave? Our neighbor knows what the shovel signifies, but he has never been asked to dig, not 4 feet below the hard surface of existence, and certainly not 6. A preacher. His calluses stem from some other source, handling daily the word of God, never straying too far from truth, the human impulse to make light of death or forget it or pray it never comes. We lie to him. We're looking for old glass. We find some antique bottles near the peony bushes while digging a grave for the cat, at the site of a primitive outhouse, a garbage dump. Happenstance in hues of brown, the earth grasps tightly around them, and some of them shatter. Dad says the old outhouse used to stand on our family's property, but that was long before the flowers and the trees, the tall trees everywhere, the trees he cut down to build this house, while I sat in the old rusty truck, just an infant then. If you understand how to angle the incisions, the trees fall quickly, fall right where you want them to land, becomes obsessive, a repetitive motion until you run out of forest. Then, what is left but dead things? Maybe you burn them. Maybe you sell the lumber for cash. Maybe they become your casket, buried there in the earth filled with bottles, the backyard of your childhood home. 4. Remember those pies I used to make? Mud mixed with pieces of broken china? Small, jagged, painted in wisps of pink floral. With my shovel, I discovered plates that used to be. I dug them up from the foundation of the house, a 2-foot patch of dry earth surrounding living space. I remember asking how they got there. I don't remember the answer. I thought of old plates in front of old people who lived in an old house. I thought of broken plates in front of broken people who lived in a broken house. I tried not to think of these two houses different, yet not sunken into the same earth. I tried to convince myself that dirt doesn't taste so bad. If you keep digging, you'll come out on the other side of the world. You just have to get past the surface of things. Be careful not to snare your hands in the roots, the ones they took from your great-grandmother's garden and transplanted there in the backyard. You expected the flowers not to bloom that first spring, but don't pretend you weren't startled when they sprang back to life, blinding you with their vibrancy. Remember bright pink, the color of the dead. I heard the small town lore when I lived in the midst of it. Homesteaders and immigrants built homes, stayed in the plains long enough to found a city, to raise families, to adopt a language, to construct steeples, to plant flowers, to require graves. But before the cemetery became a place for them, there was a drifter, and he alone laid claim to the ground. No one knew his name. No one knew why he came or the cause of death. Outside of town, my ancestors buried his unfamiliar bones. A history book says they built the cemetery around his unmarked grave, and somewhere below the fence lie the parts of his mortal experience that remain eternal. Did he have a glass bottle in hand, a pocket watch, or photograph of a lover? I pray to understand anything besides what we know, when all we know is how it ends. What I want is discovery, all that comes before. I want splinters in my fingers from structures that use the sand. I want dawn creeping up over a hill unlittered by tombstones. I want flowers in the ground, thorns and bee stings and all. I want to feel. I want storm. When he was a child, my father saw a sprig of hay pass completely through a telephone pole during a tornado. I always imagined that pole to be the one outside my bedroom window, the place in the front yard our family agreed to meet in case of a house fire. We never did. More frequently, we would retreat to the basement during severe weather, bring the cat, let it pass. The danger always subsided more quickly than anticipated. I learned my endings well. The wind either stops blowing or we cease to be moved by it. The drifting will always cease.
We can go ahead and open it up for a couple of questions.
Yeah. How did I start writing the lyric essay, she asked. A poetry class was never available to me. That's the easy answer. And I ended up taking a lot of nonfiction classes as an undergrad when I had a small crisis and decided I didn't want to be a high school teacher anymore. So I started writing more seriously, and in a class all about the essay, we looked at different kinds. And so lyric essay was one of those, and one that I spent the most time doing and had the most fun with. And my teacher was like, keep pursuing this. Yes?
Something that I found really fascinating about your piece is like the clear attention to detail, like the ambulance riding over the gravel and like the flowers, spurting up from the ground and being restored. So I thought naturally of like Greek allusions. Mm-hmm. So I thought about Persephone or Persephone. And I'm kind of curious, like, do you see connections? Do you like make allusions within your tales?
Definitely, yes. And I tried to do one with that was one time and it was really the worst. So, prayer flowers it is. But the cool thing about writing essays is you start off with that idea, right? Or those images that are part of the experience. And then the more time you spend with them, you realize the repetitions that already exist. And you can sort of tug on them and make them work in different ways and make them come to life. And even now, when I go back to some of these essays that I wrote years ago, I learn new things that I didn't realize I did, or I did realize I did, or there's a subconscious space in the lyric essay where there's a lot happening all the time, and yeah, the more that you can start to notice those patterns and take control of them, the stronger I think the writing becomes. Thank you for noticing that. Yeah.
In a list of concerns, I found a kind of transitive use of the pronoun we, referring to both your friends and your family. And we kind of just, it's especially used in the beginning. We just know kind of who you're talking about in high school or family experience. And then it kind of shifts out when we learn Allie and Harry's names. Is there any, what can you tell me about that transitive kind of we, and then shifting to I, and then maybe back to we?
Yeah, I think in the beginning stages of writing a piece like this, there's definitely a felt sense to it. And then playing with where those parts can overlap and happen. One thing I was trying to do was, kind of mess with who we're talking about or where we are when we jump between number and number. And so in the beginning, it sort of establishes a cadence, it sort of feels kind of general, a list of advice, and then we get this really specific story. I felt like it needed some kind of story like that to carry us through, and childhood seemed like the perfect place to begin. And as the older I got, and the further I got away from those childhood experiences, right, when I'm like coming back to the prairie and that other narrative that's happening, the I seemed more appropriate, right, for those moments of self-reflection. So that's how I was thinking about it. I was right.
It was great atmosphere. I like it.
Thank you.
So like in regards like to Kristen's question, you said like images really kind of is what helped you see themes in your life when you're writing. Like obviously you kind of said you learned more about yourself, I guess, and like what you see more patterns about like what kind of shape you along the way. Like was it really like was there any kind of like super emotional response to you when writing it? Like did you feel like it was therapeutic to see patterns in your own life and like where you are now versus like all these like prairie flowers that you
Sometimes that happens, definitely. Like even in a piece that I'm writing right now, I just had an experience that was so emotional when I made one of those discoveries. It's even something that I felt in coming here and having a book prize give, awards to Deborah's name. It seemed like this sort of like pattern thing that happened. And yeah, being sensitive to that is, I guess, maybe not therapeutic, but I feel and embody the writing when it's happening in that way.
How did you make the decision to organize your poems through numbered lists? Was that organizational, or was that just something you wanted to kind of drive the poem? What was that decision?
I'm trying to remember. I was sitting on your couch when I made that decision. Know where I was? That was a good question. I think I was having trouble. At first, it was just practical. I was having trouble beginning. I was having trouble figuring out what I wanted to say. I had just had the experience of going to the prairie. I knew I wanted to write about it. I knew some of the things that it had brought up in me emotionally, sort of as you asked. But I didn't know where to start. And so I just started writing this list. And then I discovered that other thing I was talking about, how you can move pieces of it around and create a really interesting structure that way. I think an opportunity there is like total numbers, which in 5 plots is significant because there's 5. And this one, I'll let you know. That's how I decided to do it. Thank you.
Kind of
on that same note with like the organization, like what was it about the first line of the list of complaints, like the size of paper cut compared to its sting? Like what was it about that line that you thought it deserved to be like that very first line that started your piece? Because I saw it like woven throughout the piece very much and like in the symbolism behind it, but like what was it that struck you about it?
I think the sound of it struck me. The idea of it struck me. It seemed like intriguing, but also maybe it was speaking to this question that you asked over here about how like writing this, like and having paper in your hand hurts. I think it hurts a lot. Even though it seems really small, it hurts a lot. So it seemed deserving of the first line for sure. Got a question over here?
Yeah, I had a question, mainly from technique. I really enjoyed your book. What I thought was really remarkable is the sort of dimensions of restraint that you showed at different points within your essays. I'm thinking specifically, like, we never find out what kind of flowers never made it through customs and that, and I find that omission such a wonderful propulsion through that essay, and I think Trax does some of that work as well in doing that work of omission. So I was just curious about how you think about gaps, omissions, that kind of vacuum that's kind of hard to cultivate within a narrative or a nonfiction essay. So I just wondered if you could speak to that and the notion of how you conceptualize that. Sometimes those might be intentional or unintentional, but I know that you're doing that well. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
Thank you. And thank you for noticing that. This is a battle that I've had through workshops, right? Like, I'm very aware of the omissions and things that I'm leaving out and those gaps per what the lyric essay depends on, I think. And so often in the workshop, it would be like, just tell us, you're getting so much out of the story, what happened? But I think that's the fun of it. And the joy for me as a reader is like figuring out the puzzle. I love reading things like that. And so writing lyric essays, I feel like the work is creating little puzzles that are difficult, but just easy enough for someone to unlock. And then when you can see someone do that, it's the best feeling. So yeah, the flower, it didn't seem important. The prairie flowers were really important to me in that one. I don't even remember at this point what it was. It was something I found on Pinterest, and it was super but in Trax, at one point, there was a whole blank white page, and my colleagues were like, did printer mess up? But, right, it was a very obvious omission of like a whole scene that I had written, and then I took it out. So, thank you for noticing that. I love that kind of work. Yes.
The themes that you touched upon are pretty heavy, like recurrence, childhood, family, and all that. Do you think, and since it's nonfiction, obviously, I think it's pretty important to you if I read it correctly. Do you think that you'd return to that, those like themes exactly in future stuff that you wrote?
Most definitely. Family is very important to me. I don't live in Nebraska anymore, and I really didn't when I was writing a lot of these pieces. But what was really fun was every time I went back, I tried to do something that I'd never done before. And so my family is there and I visit, and so I think that's kind of a fun thing to like, go out and do something and give yourself something to write about, have an experience. So I think so. I still want to do that.
We're selling copies over here, and I know Erica would be happy to sign